quite a shift from like full-time employment, but now you're a full-time founder, right? So how has that been?
Very comfortable. You get decent money, you get a lot of vacation days. It's a very comfortable way of living. And when you start setting up your own company, it's like practically pretty much the opposite of it. I don't know if you would agree, but when I look around the companies that I worked in, the companies that I know, no one builds their accounting platform, but everyone builds a data platform. To me, it doesn't make sense.
It's very, very important to try to at least understand it. It might be a really long journey and might ask those investors again for money, for advice.
Touched a very important point. It's basically investors are going to be doing a lot of due diligence before they invest in a startup. It's founders' responsibility to do the reverse of that due diligence as well. You need to do your part to understand if these are the people that you want to be taking the money for.
The Cloud Frontier podcast is brought to you by simplyblock. In this bi-weekly podcast, we explore cloud infrastructure startups, founder journeys, and discuss cutting-edge cloud technologies. Join us as we uncover the latest innovations shaping the future of cloud computing. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Cloud Frontier podcast. Today we have Burak from Bruin as a guest. Welcome, Burak.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure having you. And obviously we always start with the same story. So like, what's your story, right? We would love to hear a little bit more about Bruin, about yourself. How did you come up to be building in cloud infrastructure space? How have you made your co-founder? Tell us a little bit of of secret sauce.
So let me tell you a bit about myself, and then go a bit more into Bruin. So my name is Burak, born and raised in Turkey. I'm a software engineer by background. I studied computer science. Then I moved to Berlin, Germany in 2018 to work for this company called HelloFresh. I was thinking I would work like a year or two maybe, and I ended up working there a little over 5 years. I joined as a junior engineer and then grew a bit when I was working there. It basically gave me the chance to be exposed to a lot of different problems. In the meantime, my co-founder, him and I, we go back like 10 years. We met at a different job when we were both in the uni, and we started building products together, like trying a bunch of different things. We failed like countless times together. And he's a data scientist. He used to work for Alibaba and then King Games, Candy Crush company, Popcore, a Berlin company, a gaming company, etc. So around end of 2020, beginning of 2021, Turkey was becoming a hub for mobile gaming companies, and basically people started reaching out to him asking for consultancy, for in the data science and analytics space, and he came to me and said like, well, do you want to do this together? Let's see where it goes. And then we said, okay, let's start with it. So we were both working full time elsewhere at the time, and then we started doing some consultancy on the side, helping some companies to build their analytics tooling, help them get started with data analysis and data science in general, etc. It was basically like a very broad scope. And very quickly, it became apparent that data infrastructure was a shit show everywhere. And basically, this meant that a lot of companies had to hire a lot of engineers. They had to invest a lot of time and effort into even the basics of building their data infrastructure. It was painful for many companies, which ended up being an opportunity for us, and that's how Bruin came to life. This was basically an internal project for us at the time that we were sort of using for ourselves. Then we started opening it up to some of our customers at the time. They started enjoying it. They started paying some extra money for that, and then it started growing, which eventually led to us quitting our jobs and going full time on Bruin, which was almost exactly a year ago. Last week was our first year anniversary of going full time.
Congrats! That's a good time to, I guess, reflect and record that episode then. So how has that year been? I mean, so it's quite a shift for you from like full-time employment at HelloFresh, which is a relatively large company, right? Publicly listed company, a couple thousand employees, I guess. And now you sort of did some consultancy on the side, but now you're a full-time founder, right? So how has that been?
It's been a crazy journey, man. I mean, when I was working at a big company job, especially in Berlin and Germany, it's very comfortable. You get decent money, you get a lot of vacation days, you get like, it's a very comfortable way of living, right? And when you start setting up your own company, it's like practically pretty much the opposite of it. You have no vacation days whatsoever, and the pay is terrible, you know. So you start. I think it's a fundamental. It's a major step that you need to first be convinced that you should be going towards there, and that's what I think it took us to do that flip. On one side, yes, it's been challenging from those practical, you know, like day-to-day part of things, but it has been a tremendous learning experience for me, especially. So I'm an engineer by background. I think I'm an okay engineer. I can do some technical stuff by myself, but building a company, that's maybe like, I don't know, just 20% of it. You know, the rest is like, there's so much, you know, like a lot of other stuff, like, I don't know, building relationships, sales, marketing, operations, finance. Even like as hiring has been a major pain point for me recently. It's all basically things that fall onto you, and it's one of those things that you don't really notice when you're working at a big company, that there's so much stuff going on, that so many people are taking care of so much other stuff, that you can, so that you can focus on what you do best, you know. And now that I look back, I find that fascinating to have companies like HelloFresh, where it's huge, man. It's absolutely huge. Operating in like 20 plus markets, and everything still runs. And then when you start your own company, it's basically you having to figure out and get things going, no matter what it takes. So, long story short, it's been a huge learning experience for me, and I actually enjoy the process quite a lot most of the time.
Most of the time.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's a lot of
nice way to put it.
it's
It's a
of
roller
ups and
coaster.
downs.
I think you know, all of us founders, that like we feel it as well, and indeed, you know, sometimes I also myself feel like, you know, 80% of my time indeed goes into things that are actually not figuring out the business, right? While like we're, you know, early stage companies, it's like it's clearly pre-product market fit, it's clearly pre-scaling, it's still sort of in a survival mode, right? And you would ideally want to just really spend all your time talking to your potential users, right? Building product and you know, just going out there and spreading the word. But then, you know, sometimes you just get stuck in all those little things, right? And I think that's the reason for the roller coaster, right? Because you just don't know what you're really gonna be doing this week, right? Like you have a plan until Monday happens, right? And
it's like there's this Mike Tyson saying, like, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. You know, it's kind of every day. You know, for like the founder, like you have a plan even for the day that it's just not gonna work. You know, so you start the day. It's just not how you planned it at all. Or maybe some other founders have figured it out. I don't know. I couldn't yet. You know?
I feel like some people did, right? Because some people seem to like, yeah, super successful, not stressed. But anyways, I mean, one day. So okay, look, tell us more about Bruin. Like, what do you guys exactly do? So you sort of started already with customers, like basically from day zero, from day one. Like how, like, you know, how do you help them? What do you do? What's your vision? Tell us more about the product.
So let me take a step back. Any company that needs to analyze any sort of data, there's a couple of high-level steps that they need to take. First of all, the data is in a lot of different places, right? Let's say you have marketing campaigns, you have data in Facebook, you have data in Google, you have data in LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever. Then you have your internal systems that have a lot of user data, things like, I don't know, your application databases, internal Google Sheets, Excel files, and whatnot. And then you have a lot of third-party data that you might be receiving in different shapes and forms, etc. Right? So all of these different types of data that lives elsewhere. First of all, you need to bring that data into a central location. That central location being a data warehouse or a data lake or some form of place that you need to analyze. So that first step is called data ingestion. Once you bring this raw data in your data warehouse, you are then you're going to be doing a lot of cleaning on that data, and then you're going to start transforming the data, building data models, starting calculating aggregations. This is called data transformation. Then at every step along the way, you need to ensure that data is accurate. Data represents what you expect it to show. So there's the data quality aspect. And this whole operation needs to be done within the boundaries of data governance, right? So you need to know what data you have, where do you store it, who accesses it, how much do you pay for it. You need to handle the PII data accordingly. You need to be compliant, etc. So all of these different responsibilities fall onto the data team. And from a technical side, unlocking this, they need to be using a lot of different tools, and they need to glue a lot of different things together to be able to work end to end. There's one tool for data ingestion, one tool for transformation, one tool for quality, another for governance, another for orchestrating. So it's like 6-7 different tools. And when we look at the market, we thought, well, this seems to be madness. It's ridiculous that every team has to manage 7 different tools, pay for all of them separately, or build and maintain a lot of things in-house, which is very expensive in both financial terms as well as time cost. So Bruin is an end-to-end platform that brings together data ingestion, data transformation, data quality, and governance. It effectively allows teams to connect a bunch of different external sources, connect their data warehouse, so Bruin can land this data into their data warehouse, and then they can write their transformation logic either in SQL, they can write Python, and Bruin takes care of orchestrating them, running them accurately, notifying the users if there's anything wrong, etc. So it basically allows, it sort of commoditizes data platforms, let's put it that way. I don't know if you would agree, but when I look around the companies that I worked in, the companies that I know, no one builds their accounting platform, but everyone builds a data platform, and to me, it doesn't make sense. So that's what we are. That's effectively what we're doing. We're an early stage team. We're 10 people. We are primarily based in Berlin, although we have a couple of people working remotely in Turkey as well. We have customers across different industries. We have customers across different geographies in the UK, in Germany, in Turkey, in Dubai. We have a couple of customers around the globe. And we are in that journey of figuring out the exact value proposition, what makes it work much better for certain types of customers versus whatnot, and sort of stepping alongside that journey.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. And so, what are some of those early use cases that you see your customers using Bruin for?
Yeah, so initially our customers were mobile gaming companies. Mobile gaming companies have this common pattern where they tend to be small, but data is very relevant for them because effectively they make a lot of money with correct ad placements as well as like the user behavior. So behavioral analysis on that data is very important for them. They use a lot of analytical tools like Google Analytics, Firebase, Segment, or a bunch of other ways of collecting events. And they also have a lot of marketing platforms that they need to get data from in terms of their marketing spend, as well as like the ad revenue they make out of the games. So early use cases that we found people use Bruin for was, well, connect these select set of sources basically for pretty much the same for all of these companies like Google Analytics, Adjust, XFlyer, a bunch of other sources, and then start analyzing the user behavior in terms of how are the levels being played in the game, where do they make the most money, where do users get stuck, where do they start losing users, where do the installs come from, so you can attribute the marketing spend, etc. That was the first use case that people started using us for, and then that started expanding further into machine learning side of things. For instance, after you have started bringing this data in and you start modeling this data, it allows you to do that kind of predictive analysis on this data as well. So you can design better levels in your games. You can design better monetization strategies. You can run game economy simulations and all that kind of stuff. So in mobile gaming's perspective, this was where we started seeing the early traction. But then when we started stepping out of mobile gaming specifically, we started seeing basically like the same pattern being replicated with the platforms changing, right? Effectively, for a retailer, they're going to have a lot of internal data or data that comes from Shopify or some other e-commerce platforms. They need to bring that data in, build the same internal user models, basically model their worldview in their data, right? And then first do reactive analytics. So they build reports, They start like using those reports in their day-to-day, and then gradually go towards predictive and proactive analytics, so basically that's how we've been seeing people using Bruin so far.
Yeah, that's very clear. And so how did those companies solve it without Bruin, or how are they solving without Bruin? Do they
Yeah, so
like build their own workarounds, or is there any like other types of technologies that they just plug in?
there are, yeah. So it's usually a mix. So there's going to be, in the end, we're selling it a technical tool to technical group of folks, right? So they build some solutions by themselves, either building from scratch or taking what's out there in the market and gluing it together. So often, like 90% of our customers already had some sort of a solution when we got in. But there's going to be a couple of like patterns that we see. For instance, it's relatively easy for a team to get started bringing data in from external sources using off-the-shelf solutions that just focus on data ingestion part. But the more they start using those in their day-to-days, data quality starts becoming more of a problem, right? And it becomes a major pain point for these companies that they start looking around for data quality tools then. So it becomes a separate part of the tool. Then governance start becoming a problem. Or the moment that they want to step out into bringing data from a source that does not integrate with the tool that they already have, then they need to build like further solutions, So often the teams are going to have their ways around building some form of a solution, but there's going to be these gaps, and we tend to work best when the teams have already tried this out, and they are convinced that there are problems with the existing way of working, right? And it becomes an immediate click for us when they experience those data quality issues, for instance, or when they've spent hours or if not days maintaining their platforms every week, or they had an incident, or basically like the benefits of like a managed platform.
But then there's a question: how do you find those people who have just experienced that problem, right?
It is tricky. So there are certain signals. For instance, when we look at the market, this basically the idea of like having separate tools for each of them was basically branded as what's called modern data stack. And modern data stack has a couple of products in there. So the moment that you see a company, someone on their LinkedIn puts a skill for 5chan or Airbyte or DBT or Mozart or some other alternative, it sort of hints us that, well, this seems like a company that already invested into data and analytics so far, right? And they are using some tools. Chances are they are experiencing some of the problems that we see on the market as well. But then it always starts with an open conversation for us, right? It's going to be like, well, we have some hypotheses about what problems you might be experiencing but like, do you want to have a conversation with us and share some of the problems that you see in your business, some of the things that you wish you had some better solutions on? And a framing we use there is first of all, if a company is experiencing problems in terms of capacity, especially when it comes to engineering, the first question we ask is, well, you have 2 engineers now. What if you had 2 more? What would you like to do? What would you like to focus on? And that usually gives us a signal with regards to what's valuable for them, what do they have in their mind. And then it also gives us the opportunity to show that, well, hey, you can keep those same people and deliver those things that you wanted to deliver without an extra headcount. Maybe we can help you with that, So
that's a cool way to I guess approach it, and like smart way of asking questions, right?
Yeah, you need to. It's basically very hard, as I'm sure you know. It's very hard to get people to tell you their exact problems, So it's often the case that you try and ask different types of questions to understand if they have any problems or not. And sometimes they're not going to have any problems. Sometimes everything works perfectly. Their existing tooling, their existing stack, ways of working is good enough for them. So there's not going to be. It's not necessarily a perfect solution what we're building for everyone, right? It's going to work for certain types of companies, certain types of problems.
Like especially when you're a pre-seed stage company, I mean, you need to be narrow, right? Like you're not gonna build solution for everyone. I think over time that's changing, right? But I think at this stage it's very important to anyways go narrow. I mean, one question I had regarding that is, how do you find, like, not how do you find those people, but how do you get them to talk to you, right? Because as you said, you're asking them for sort of open conversation at first. People are busy, right? And sales is hard.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
So, well, initially it was pretty much all through our network, So you go through your network, you try to find people that you're already connected with, you already have that trust relationship in place so that they are willing to put in 20 minutes, 30 minutes to talk to you, and share some of those pain points. And many of our early customers came through our network that way. We started experiencing that problem more when we started outgrowing our network because, well, I talked to everyone. I think I thought of talking to, right? How do I get these other people? For those, we tend to. So there's a couple ways that we sort of try to flip this game in our favor. The first of all is we are an open core company, so we have some open source tooling that we know some companies are already using our stuff. So when a company already uses something we built in the open source, there is already some level of pre-existing trust relationship when I say, hey, look, we built that tool. Do you have 15 minutes to chat with us to, help us better guide where to grow the tool further, etc.?
What are those tools? Because that's really interesting, even for me personally, because, that's also something I think of. So yeah, I would love to learn more, like how did you approach that, of the idea of building like sort of like adjacent tools to your business?
Yeah, so the first launch that we made that sort of became rather successful is a tool called Ingestion. It's basically an open source command line application that allows you to point it to your database and then point it to your data warehouse. It basically pulls data from there, loads it into your data warehouse with a single command. So you can put it in a GitHub Actions kind of a place and then start replicating data without writing a single line of code. This tool became rather popular on GitHub. It even got to GitHub trending for some time. So that helped us to build some initial traction around the tooling. We are preparing for a second launch in the next couple of weeks for our end-to-end pipeline tool, which will be also fully open source. The way we thought about open source since the beginning is, first of all, we use open source in everything we do, everything we build. So there's like a sense of giving back, and that was like an important part for me specifically, personally as well. The second aspect of building open source is, can we find stuff that can exist by themselves and generate meaningful enough value for people that use it without people being a customer for us, And that usually signals us towards a standalone tool or a standalone library or something that people can already start using in their day-to-day. And that helps building a more genuine relationship with these people when they start using our technology, because I can simply say, look, I am a commercial entity. Of course, I'm trying to make money, but there's this thing that you can still use without paying us anything, without having any relationship or whatsoever with us,
And do you somewhat promote it? Like how did it pick up traction on GitHub?
So we did a couple of things for that launch specifically, which was we first of all went through our network and shared it on our socials, on LinkedIn, on the friends that we know, just to say, hey, we built this thing that works. Do you want to give it a try? In parallel, we did a launch on Reddit, we identified 10 plus subreddits that could be relevant for us. So we did a launch there. But the one that made the biggest impact in terms of the tool being noticed by a lot of people was Hacker News. So we did a Hacker News launch. We also did like a product hunt. Yeah, we did like a product hunt launch, etc. But it really didn't make much sense or didn't make any change. Show Hacker News was by far the biggest traffic that we received in that process. And I think that the thing that made it work was I genuinely explained why we built this tool, why we thought it makes sense to exist and stand alone, and what problem we're trying to solve. And then people started reacting to it. I
But
think
you
there's
still sort of indicated that like it's part of sort of your business, right?
Yeah, it was like exactly. It was like it's public on our business organization account on GitHub as well,
Right.
right?
It's in your
And
in
then
your message.
exactly, it's in our GitHub account. But basically, we said, hey, this is the MIT license. Use it as you wish, and we don't need anything from you. If there's anything we can help, here's a Slack community that we built. Feel free to hop in. Happy to help you with any questions, etc. And yeah, we didn't ask for anything in return.
But then you don't collect any customer data, but maybe you just see people who are like, putting stars on GitHub and.
We have the star count, which is like an indicator. We have a telemetry for command invocations for the tool, which is optional and can be disabled as well. And that's the only thing that we know and we collect. But I think the thing that the best signal that we get out of that is when we add new features, we're going to start seeing people reacting to those releases or reacting to those release messages and stuff like that. Or sometimes they even reach out to us directly on our socials asking questions about it. So that becomes like, that's one of the things that I really like about doing like an open core company, which is you get to interact with these people with no commercial relationship whatsoever, and I really like that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And so how was then fundraising? So I imagine, if you have like early traction, some customers from sort of day one, like fundraising was not so bad.
Well, I this was the first time that we raised some funds. In my life, this was the first time I ever fundraised. It took us some time. We had a first attempt that didn't really work. We had some early customers, but the strategy was not very clear with regards to how this would become a big company. And the second time we did that was after we resigned. So in Germany you have 3 months of notice period, right? So when we resigned from our jobs, we didn't have any funds for the company. We had some revenue, but by no means it was not enough for us to sustain the founders even. That 3 months timeline was basically where we said, okay, we're going to have to fundraise. We're going to need to be able to pay the rent somehow. And we didn't want to feel that stress. So I started doing a lot of cold outreach. I dropped messages to hundreds of investors. Many of them didn't even return. And, but in the end, some did, and we started having some conversations. In the end, we ended up raising a European VC called Lunar Ventures. We raised 750,000 euros. And then we also, after the fundraise, we got into Techstars as well as an accelerator, which had a little bit of cash investment as well, and like the 3 months period of the accelerator. So the fundraising itself was a very very interesting experience from my perspective. I've never talked about money that freely and that openly, and there was like we're talking about like a lot of money, at least for me, and it was a tough time. But I think in the end, it boils down to a couple of principles. So, do you have relevant? Do the founders understand the market, and do the founders fit into the market? Is there a case to be made that this is going to be a multi-billion company, right? And why is now the right time for this thing to be built? I think like a couple of iterations on these answers on these questions basically allowed us to make a much clearer case about what Bruin does and why it's going to be a success, which ended up helping us in terms of fundraising as well.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, you need to have those, but I think you also need to build somehow trust. So obviously the investors need to trust that, like, sort of, you're gonna take that money and actually do the best sort of possible, right, within your capabilities, basically, or even beyond.
Absolutely. And I think it's also very important for founders to keep in mind as well. I think it's important for both parties to keep in mind, which is both the founder community and the VC community are small. If you do wrong to anyone, in any of these relationships, it's very quickly heard. People know. So that means that puts a certain amount of pressure in the whole relationship for everyone to be transparent and honest. And something that we hold dearly from day one is this is going to be a 10-year long, maybe more, partnership, right? We want to make sure that we pick the right people, we work with the right team, and we're open and transparent from the start, including our failures. Actually, even more so than the failures, right? Because my understanding of being a founder is 90% of the stuff that I do, I have zero clue about. I know nothing about what I'm doing. And it's basically the constant iteration and the constant learning loop that you try to learn and try and iterate and improve and get to a better place. And I think investors are people that should be alongside you in that journey. So like building that trust early on and being transparent, I think is a very important investment to that relationship.
Yeah, definitely, because I think a lot of especially first-time founders, they just want a investor, meaning like anyone who gives you money. But I think what they don't realize is like then you get that money and then actually you do have quite some responsibility, and it's quite a relationship. The relationship starts only afterwards, after you've taken the money, and not, it doesn't end with taking the money. And I think especially if you're a first-time founder, I think it's very, very important to try to at least understand it. And as I said, it might be a really long journey, and you might ask those investors again for money, for advice. They also, you might fail, and eventually you need to sort of, make sure that the investors you choose are the people you really like comfortable, doing all of that with, right?
Exactly. I think so. You touched a very important point. Before the fundraising, I met with another founder to ask some advice, and one of the things that he told me stuck with me for a very long time is basically investors are going to be doing a lot of due diligence before they invest in a startup, right? It's founders' responsibility to do the reverse of that due diligence as well. You need to do your part to understand if these are the people that you want to be taking the money for. In the end, the whole fundraising process is very slow, and then suddenly it's very fast, right? If you start getting like some early interest, other people are going to hear, and they're going to start to give you, they're going to want to give you money as well. And then you need to make sure that you pick the right partner to work with, and then you sort of do your due diligence with regards to that. One of the things that I found that helped us a lot was basically talking to the portfolio companies, other founders of those investors, Founders are very helpful to each other in general. At least that's been my experience so far. And they're going to be very open, and they tell you a lot of they share a lot of experiences. And in the end,
that's true.
If you hear founders of an investor being unhappy with how the investor has behaved in their experience working that company for 5, 6, 7 years, it gives you a lot of great signals, But basically, like you said, you should not be taking every money that's given to you. Quite the contrary. You need to be very selective with regards to the people that you take the money from, as well as the amount of money you take, because all of those come with a lot of strings attached.
Yeah, I think a lot of startups actually like raise too fast and too much, and that actually can like really cause a lot of problems, and you can actually just like even fail because of that. I mean, there are those many companies that fail because they just raise too fast, too much, right? And then they cannot, they cannot live up to their valuations. They cannot live up to, they spend just things like premature, like spend on things prematurely, right? And I mean, it's a tough balance, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen next. You can't foresee the future, right? So it's very hard to really plan for it. Even if you're like, you're the best person to know your business, but like you cannot predict what's really going to happen, right?
Exactly. There's one risky part that I see with that, which is it's very easy for us founders to mistake fundraising to be a success. It feels like success. It's a lot of money that's given to you. People trust you. People believe in your idea. But that's basically the least of it's the beginning of a much more harder path down the beginning,
and it's something that needs to be done, right? If you need to raise to keep going, to survive, yes, it needs to be done, right? But there's like a lot of other things that that qualify in that category,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. It just starts from there, and I think it's important to sort of take pride in saying that, okay, like we managed to raise a lot of money, because like we built a solid basis and people believe, etc. But that's the beginning. The real path starts after you have the money, and then you are left with the question, okay, now what? How are we going to deploy that money? How are we going to spend that money? Now make this into a business, solve real problems,
Yeah,
And
that's
I
actually the
think
hardest part in the
I
end, because
agree.
we get completely arbitrary amount of money, and then you need to
Yeah.
really like do the most out of it, right? And
Yeah.
it's actually a bit of an art, right? Because you can spend it on everything and
Absolutely.
nothing, right?
Absolutely.
Eventually.
Yeah.
All right. No, that was great, and we're going towards the end of discussion. So I have those two typical questions that I ask everyone, and I think you might have a really good answers for at least the first one, because it's what are the most valuable resources where you sort of get your knowledge about maybe being a founder, maybe about data platforms or data infrastructure. Like, where do you go to if you need some advice, right? Is it a person, a book, a podcast, a tweet, or what is that?
So I think it's a couple of channels that I try to feed myself from. The first of all, like on the technical parts, there's a couple of blogs. An immediate name that pops into my mind is a guy called Seattle Data Guy that has like this nice Substack, and then he writes a lot of articles and very very thoughtful processes. A couple of other people that I follow on LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn is very active when it comes to data community. So there's that. The second part is Techstars family. So we went through Techstars. It's an accelerator. We got to learn a lot of stuff as part of Techstars as well, and it basically like helped us settle down as a company and build some of the basics right. And that aspect of the community has been definitely my go-to. And taking this a step further, one of the things that I find myself very lucky to be is I sort of managed to find some founder friends among me where we go through similar pains, and regardless of the company size and stage and the amount of revenue the company makes or the stage of a product, doesn't matter. That community of small group of founders that I get to know has been by far the strongest sort of channel that I get a lot of my knowledge from. So it also helps. Yeah, I think a hard part of this whole thing is you need a safe group of people where you can talk about mistakes, you can talk about harder parts of the day-to-day, right? And I think for myself that those group of people have been incredibly helpful to me so far. So I think it's a very lonely journey in general being a founder, and we need those kinds of people. So I don't really have any other stronger like books or that other kinds of resources. I think it's more like get the people besides you,
Yeah,
have
I
those
think
kinds of
so.
people.
I mean, eventually you need to have someone to call, right? If you really feel
Yeah.
like, it's
Yeah.
over, or like, it's not gonna happen, or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good one. Last question, what is the most exciting thing that you see out there happening in data or cloud infrastructure space?
Most exciting thing. There are a couple of things, but the thing that excites me the most is over the past, let's say 10 years, data warehouses have evolved to be walled gardens, basically. So you put your data in, and then it's almost impossible for you, or very expensive for you to get your data out of these platforms. You're going to be paying a lot of egress costs. There's going to be a lot of patterns that are shaped around these platforms, which means there's not really any freedom, even if the data belongs to you. And one of the most exciting things that's been happening in the space recently is proliferation of new data storage formats, things like Apache Iceberg or Delta Lake and stuff like that, where the data formats are open source, and they allow compatibility across different providers where the entities can own their own data, So it excites me a lot that companies are going to be able to mix and match different tools without having to be locked in another platform, where they have the freedom to choose the types of the workloads they want to run on and where do they want to run that. In that sense, Apache Iceberg and the whole movement around those open data formats has been really exciting for me.
Yeah, I think that's a big topic, and also for us at simplyblock, I mean, we're in a bit of different space, but I think eventually we also enable really people to sort of unlock their data from any kind of lock-in, right? Whether it's a database vendor lock-in or whether it's a cloud lock-in, right? I think it's really important because eventually data will be your biggest asset now with AI and everything that's happening, right? Like you really want to own your data, right? And you want to be able to access it, often-wise and fast and efficiently and easily and move it right around. All right, Burak, that was great. Pleasure having you. Great discussion, great insights. Really appreciate that. Anything you want to share to the audience at this point, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Rob. It was really lovely to chat with you. If there is anything anyone can think of, any problems they have with data, I'm happy to just chat and see, just to learn, and just to connect, I would love
just a discussion, chat. Right? And who knows?
Exactly. Thanks for having me, and I really appreciate it. It was a really lovely chat. Thank you.
Thank you for coming along, and enjoy building.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. Cloud Frontier is brought to you by simplyblock, an intelligent database storage orchestrator. Get more IAPS and lower latency for your databases in the cloud. Visit our website at simplyblock.io for more information.